it's Ashley Bookishrealm. Welcome to another video. I feel like I have just been coming at y'all so hard with the content, so intentional, so definitely on purpose, but I just feel like once again, better space, more motivation, more creativity juices flowing, whatever the case may be. I really like this top. I just got it. I think it's super cute. It just, fall flavor things going on here. So today, as you can see from the title of this video, we are here to do the best and worst books of September. And so if you've been here for any time, thank you for continuing to ride with your girl. If you're new here, welcome. I do my wrap-ups a little differently. So typically what I do is, because I have a tendency to read a lot during the month, I've been slowing down a little bit because of course, with the move and everything like that. It's been a little bit more difficult to get back into the swing of things. I just got kind of like my reading steam back in the month of September, but I really do crank them out. I really do. And so what I was noticing is it was just becoming too much for me to sit down and talk about all the books that I was reading and then having to go and edit, 2.5 hours worth of footage and getting it down to an hour. It just was becoming so excessive. And so I made the decision that I would actually be doing in-depth reviews and sharing my thoughts in my recent reads videos. And then once I was finished with the recent reads for the month, I would be doing a complete and total wrap up, which the wrap up is just focusing on the best and worst. I'll tell you everything that I read and I'll give you a little bit of statistics, but I won't be going into detail for every single book. In order to get that, you'll have to check out those recent reads, which I will link down in the description box below. I'm also going to link a playlist. I just need to create a playlist at this point because they're coming once a week now, and so it'd be better if you just need easy access to past recent reads videos, that you could just check those out. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into everything that I ended up reading in the month of September. I did end up reading 22 books, which from going from reading only 2 to 22 in a month's time is really good. What I did notice is that I was reading quite a few shorter texts this month. I try to aim for at least 10,000 pages a month, but it's been a little dicey here in August and September. Definitely trying to make up for it in October, November, and December so I can make my 100,000 page count goal. But this month I read a total of 4,819 pages. 12 of those works were by BIPOC authors, which is good. Whenever I do my reading, I'm looking for 50-50 there. And so I hit that by reading 12 BIPOC authors. I did not do good on my queer representation this month at all. I only had 2 books that had queer representation, unfortunately. And so it was well below what my expectations are for myself throughout the month. 4 of the books that I read were physical. 4 of the books that I read were ebooks, and 14 were audio. So this was a heavy audio month, still getting adjusted to being in a new place, got a lot going on at work. So of course the heavy audiobook listening is going to happen. It probably will be the same going into October, but we'll see what happens. But it still is kind of a good spread, 8 physical and ebook compared to the 14 audio. I like more so to kind of make it half and half, but things happen. They happen. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you all of the books that I ended up reading this month. The first was The Personal Librarian, then The Quiche of Death, which is the first in the Agatha Raisin series. Then I read Days of Love at Seagull Villa, Volume 2. I just want to hold this up and let y'all know off the top that eventually, probably starting this month, I am going to stop covering my comics, graphic novels, and manga on this channel. If you did not know, I do have a second channel where I cover all of that information, and so I'll be sure to link that channel in the description box below, as well as in the card somewhere up above. But for this month, I will keep it all in one, but I will be doing separate wrap-ups on that channel. After that, we had Be Real, Macy Weaver, Eden's Everdark, Tumble, Empty Smiles, Cookies and Milk, Forever, A Wrinkle in Time, New Kid, Railed by the Easter Bunny, Caprice, Underwater Pleasures, Rapture at Sea, Return to the Beach, Midnight Mass, Nothing More to Tell, Refugee, One of Us is Dead, Jazz, and The Proudest Blue. So there are some of these books, of course, books just start flying now. So some of these books, especially the ones I Am Jazz, The Proudest Blue, New Kid, A Wrinkle in Time, and Forever are covered in a different reading vlog. If you want to check that out, that is where I spend 48 hours reading nothing but banned books. So I will also link that vlog in the card symbol above. And now we're going to dip into the worst and the best books of the month. I always do this by starting off with the worst books of the month because I like to finish on a positive note. For this month, I did 4 and 4. So 4 in my worst and most disappointing. I always like to say most disappointing because sometimes I have some 3-star reads that end up in there, and they end up in there because they were not what I was expecting them to be. And then of course for my best, I'm usually looking at my 4, 4.5, and 5-star books as my best books of the month. Okay, so the first one that I have on this list is One of Us is Dead, and it is by Geneva Rose. I have been slowly reading a little bit more thrillers, and so sometimes I'll see my library get one. Oh God, my voice. Sometimes I'll see my library pick up one, like we just get it as an audiobook, and I'll just get on the holds list for it and just kind of listen to it just to try out just different points in the genre of thrillers and mysteries and the subgenres that would fit into there. So I decided to randomly pick this one up because it sounded really interesting. It's about women who live in Buckhead, Atlanta, and they are wealthy housewives. It focuses on several main characters from several different perspectives. We have Shannon, who used to be kind of like the head the head woman in charge. I was about to say something else, but she gets dumped by her husband Bryce, and Bryce then ends up marrying a younger girl from, I believe, Texas by the name of Crystal. Then we have Olivia, and Olivia is been dying to be the queen bee, and when Shannon kind of gets dethroned because her husband dumps her, she kind of sees it as her opportunity to rise to the occasion and become the new queen bee. And then our final character, make sure I get her name right, is Jenny. And Jenny owns a business by the name of Glow, where she kind of services all of the other women and just very highly prominent clientele, essentially. And of course, you know, when you work in any type of like hair industry, nailed, whatever, any type of like cosmetology type of area, you end up hearing a lot of people's business. And so Jenny knows a lot of their business. And like I said, it's told in alternating perspectives, and so this definitely had like a Real Housewives vibe to it. Not Real Housewives of Atlanta. We will never ever say that, but it definitely had like a Real Housewives vibe to it. Really catty, a lot of backstabbing going on, and so there were a couple of twists and turns. It just never really held my interest. And before we got to the end of the book, I was still pretty much sitting at like a 3-star. So the whole point of it is that we're getting some perspective with one of the characters that's being interviewed by a police detective who is trying to figure out how somebody in this group has died. So you know that going into the text that someone has died, and we're basically retracing the steps, figuring out who died and who did it. So it was interesting. It was catty. It was a lot of like weird things happening, but the ending. And it's so weird to have to talk about this book because if you talk about it in too much detail, you really do reveal stuff, and which is why I think it's always harder to review and to really explain books like this, because every little moment pretty much counts or they matter. And so the ending was so left field, it just didn't make sense. Like nothing was set up for it to be that moment. And I was like, I felt like for the serious nature of a discovery that is made about some people in this book, that it was handled kind of blasé. And so I didn't really like that as a reader. Like if you're going to take something as serious as what it was, which I can't even tell you what it was, which is the most wild part of it, can't say what it was because it is a spoiler. I think that you have to be just a little bit more nuanced in how you weave that into a story. And I don't feel like our author did that at all. I feel like it was kind of thrown in there as kind of like shock value, but it didn't really end up working as shock value. It ended up being like you took something that is extremely extremely serious, threw it in the book as a plot twist, and it didn't work. And I personally, as a reviewer, just didn't appreciate that. So I went from 3 stars to 2 stars. It was full of tropes, and the tropes just kept replaying themselves. And so it just wasn't a well executed book. Good intentions, interesting premise, but it didn't follow through. And so this is one of the most disappointing books, one of the worst books that I read this month. The next one I hate to put on this list because this was a middle grade book that I thought I was going to enjoy, and I thought that the cover was just really, really beautiful, and that is Be Real, Macy Weaver by Lakita Wilson. I thought that this was going to be something that it wasn't. As you can see from the cover on the screen, it looks like Macy is just having fun with friends and really just, you know, and getting into fashion. It's like cute middle grade contemporary book. And I read a book that focused on the worst middle grade mother in the history of all middle grade mothers. I have never read a book like this that is targeted at a middle grade audience that had a parent that was as trash as she was. So the story follows Macy. We meet her in the beginning of the story. She has this friend, and her friend decides that, hey, I no longer want to be friends with you. This is right before summer. Macy really can't cope with it. She's struggling with the idea of no one wanting to be her friend, or her best friend essentially dumping her, which I thought that's really, really depressing and sad. Then we get to meet Macy's parents. And so Macy's mother is pretty much unhappy with her career working in a bank. She decides that she wants to go back to school, so she applies at school. Come to find out, she was supposed to apply to a local school, but she didn't tell her husband that she applied to a school that was out of state. They live in the South. They end up having to go north because her mom really, really wants to go to the school. And the only reason why they end up going is because Macy feels like if she goes to a new city in a new school, she'll be able to start new and make new friends. And so in some weird twist, her parents are like, yeah, let's do it. Because her mother also applied to an out-of-state school, which her husband told her, like, can you please apply local or to a state school, because this is where I have a job and everything like that. So then come to find out, they move north. Her mother decides, I'm not going to live with my family. Excuse me. She's going to live on campus so she can get the real college experience. Ma'am, no, that's not how this works. It was so many questionable things in that first decision, and it only gets progressively worse. So Macy gets to this new school. She ends up just lying all the time, trying to make herself seem like something she's not, because she feels like that's the only way that she can make friends. She has an obsession, a very unhealthy obsession, with another girl who she wants to be friends with, and she does anything, like lies and manipulates to make sure that this girl notices her, when there are other kids that really like Macy just as she is, and they want to be her friend. And so that within itself was just very strange. That was strange. She is extremely codependent, and to see that as a middle grade main character, I kind of struggle with that a little bit. I know it does happen, but I, as a parent, I struggle with that a lot. And then it just was exasperated by the fact that she would ask her mother, like, can you hang out? Can you spend some time with me? And her mother would be like, oh, I can't hang out with you because I'm studying for this test. I have this final coming up, yada, yada, yada. And then she would go on Instaslam, aka Instagram, because clearly she probably couldn't use the name Instagram. She would go on Instaslam, and she would see her mother having these parties and going out for pizza and hanging out with all these classmates. And just like, you're just lying to your child so that you can party, and you're leaving her there. Her dad is having to work twice as many hours because he needs the money to be able to help pay for his wife's college tuition and take care of his child. So Macy's always at home by herself. She has a neighbor that wants to help, but she feels awkward because she thinks the neighbor is trying to be her mother, when the neighbor really just knows that this is a broken family and she's trying to help out as much as she can. And then we have Macy's mother come back into the picture and gaslight the hell out of her child. Like, I have never read a book like this. Her mother was just it was abuse in my eyes. I just don't even know how to really explain it. And I hated that. I really, really disliked that. Like, for her to look at her husband and her daughter and say, this is how y'all always do. Y'all always gang up on me. Or she like try to like tell Macy, now why would you do that? Like, you don't want to hurt mommy's feelings, do you? Like, manipulative. so manipulative, so wrong, liar, just has no desire to take care of her child at all. And while I know stories like this are real, I know kids experience this, and I'm not the target audience, so that's why I'm kind of like, I'm very hesitant in how I'm going to review this, because I still haven't even written my full Goodreads review of it. I just found it so disappointing because I think my expectations were in a different place, and I just, as a mother myself, it was just very, very hard reading about a mother with a daughter as well that just treated her like complete trash. And then Macy is not also, she's been through so much that she ends up becoming like not the most likable character. So it was just so many different elements to it that just low-key drove me crazy. And I was like, I don't know how to process this book. I don't know how to rate this book. I just know that I was utterly disappointed by this book and the relationship that did not exist between Macy and her mother. And then her dad being absent because of the fact that he had to work so much. And he was supportive when he was like in the picture, like when he was on page dialogue wise, he was extremely supportive, but like Macy needed so much more, and my heart just broke for her. But at the same time, like Macy was also out here doing some wild stuff, so it was like just a whole bag of mess. And so I have to be very strategic, like I said, in how I'm going to write a review for this one, because I am not the target audience, and I definitely can see how this would appeal or be really beneficial for someone who is going through what Macy is going through. The next one that I have on my list is going to be Days of Love at Sequel Villa Volume 2. This one was started off as a manga that I thought I was really going to enjoy because of the fact that there is a kind of like Yuri type of vibe going on. It's never really confirmed on page just yet. And so I was like, okay, we have two people here, main characters dealing with some really complex themes. She has come to this villa because her fiance broke up with her because he got her best friend pregnant. And then we have our other main character who is raising her niece because her entire family has passed away. And so they both are dealing with a lot of emotional struggles, but they get along really well, and they seem like they just are a great support system to each other. But this has, and I talked about this in one of my recent reads vlogs, this has an incest subplot. And they are half sisters. I don't know where it comes from, why it's even present, why it even needs to be a thing whatsoever, but it took me a second to pick up on that, the fact that that was going on, because I knew that one of them, like that they were half sisters, but I didn't realize that there was like this romantic thing going on. And I don't know if the mangaka is trying to dig deeper and really kind of showcase that one of the young girls who is a part of this relationship has gone through some significant trauma, abandonment by, well, her mother ends up passing away, abandonment by her stepmother or her sister's mother, and whether her sister's mother being like abusive towards her is kind of making her lash out and do something that she knows is going to make everybody uncomfortable. But it just, I don't know what the mangaka's intentions are with this, but I just know that reading kind of that subplot made me uncomfortable. And I'm trying to figure out what the mangaka is trying to do, because the series deals with such heavy and complex themes. I hear that the actual like incest undertone plot, whatever, is dissolved by volume 3, but I'm also not in a rush to read it. But it was so disappointing. It was so disappointing to kind of get to that point, because I really just was looking forward to watching these two characters develop and watching some of their possible like romantic feelings develop. And I was okay with like the darker themes coming in or the more complicated conversations that the mangaka was trying to have. But that incest thing just kind of like threw me for a complete loop, a skip, a jump, a hop. I was done. The last one that I have on my most disappointing or worst books for the month is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. I always screw this woman's name up. So I read this for Banned Books Week, and it's in that vlog where I talk about where I read banned books for 48 hours and end up reading 5 banned or challenged books. And so I decided to pick up A Wrinkle in Time because I had not read A Wrinkle in Time in years. I remember this book, but I also know that I have seen the 2 movie adaptations a lot. And sometimes when you start watching movie adaptations, you remember that as being the story and it's not the story. And so I did not enjoy this as much as I think I enjoyed it when I was younger and I read it. I think that what she was attempting to do and why it's challenged heavily because of the connections between science and religion that she makes throughout this. But it was just a lot of heavy science that I think I was not necessarily interested in. And Meg, y'all, I get it. I am always the one to say that these kids in these books are developmentally appropriate. Like, this is how we were probably acting when we were their age. Meg is annoying. Meg is frustrating. Meg just drove me wild. I couldn't explain it. It was a personality conflict between me and her. Like, I couldn't connect with her. I know old girl was going through a lot because her dad was missing. She got bullied a lot, but she just the whining and the complaining, and I was just like, just do it or not. Either you're gonna do it or you're not gonna do it. But child, you're making me go mad. And so I did not connect with this story as much as I wanted to, because Meg she threw me off so much throughout the story. And I did not remember this book having such heavy Christian undertones. Like, I didn't remember that. So when I was reading it, and it's not that it's a bad thing, it's not, I don't mind that. It didn't bother me at all. But I was very shocked because I didn't realize how much of a connection there was between religion and science, which I did appreciate that about this. But Meg really drove this story in a whole. It still is a 3-star read for me. I still would give it 3 stars, but I was so disappointed that this is not what I remembered it to be. And so going back and rereading it as an adult, it's like, dang, I remember this being so much better than what it is. And I did not enjoy it my second time. Maybe this was even my third time reading this. I didn't enjoy it at all. I think maybe like the concept it's okay. Like, I think that it was fascinating for the time in which it was written. This was originally published in the 60s, but I think in 2022, not so much. Like, it's very stereotypical, like good versus evil type of tropes going on there. So it was nothing that was like super fascinating now walking into 2020, but I could definitely see where it was in terms of how pivotal it was in the time that it was published. But yeah, I hate that I didn't love it more. Okay, so on to the books that I loved. We love to love good books. And so I read some really good ones this month. I read more good than disappointing. I had more solid reads this month than mediocre or disappointing. And so the first one that I have on this list is Midnight Mass by Sierra Simone. Ooh, child. So I decided to get Preach off of the Audible sale. I just talked about this in my last recent reads. I read both Preach and Midnight Mass, and I was so nervous about Preach because it does, or not Preach. Why am I sitting here calling this book Preach, y'all? Y'all was gonna sit right here and let me call this book Preach. Priest, not Preach. Priest. The book is Priest. So I've gotten Priest in the Audible sale, and I was very nervous about reading it because it does talk about, or it features, a priest as a main character who has a physical relationship, breaks his vows with someone who comes in to confess, to make a confession. And they do some really obscene things in the church using church objects. And so I was like, I had heard that before, and I was like, oh, I said, goodness gracious, I said, this is probably going to be so blasphemous. But I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed Priest. Why do I want to keep calling it Preach? I enjoyed Priest, but Midnight Mass. Oh my gosh, Midnight Mass, y'all, was so beautiful. It is the follow-up to Priest, so I can't really say much, which is unfortunate for me to choose a book that I can't really talk about because I don't want to spoil anything. I do talk a little bit about content warnings for this one, which please, if you don't have to even watch the whole reading vlog, you don't, but I do have time stamped in my recent reads number 11. I have it time stamped from Midnight Mass. There is a content warning that I shared as a spoiler, but I think that it was important for me to share that content warning because of the fact that I think that it could be harmful for some people, or it could be really triggering for some people to have to read that. But I do think that this book was beautifully written. I really can't say anything about it, because if I tell you anything about what this book is about, I'm telling you what happens in the first one. And so with that being said, this is probably the most obscure and unlike Ashley review that I have ever done on this channel. But all I can say is that these books are definitely worth the read. I can say of both of these, both Priest and Midnight Mass, that Sarah Simone does a wonderful job challenging our thought processes about the traditional values often associated with religion, and not in a disrespectful way. It is done very tastefully. It is very much so the conflict of the physical body and the spiritual body, and how humans want that physical closeness to another human. Not everyone, but some humans do want that physical closeness to another human, and how does that conflict with our spiritual beliefs, and does it really conflict with our spiritual beliefs? Because if that physical closeness is looked at in the sense of a shared love between two people, and if God is love, how wrong could that be? How wrong could that be? And I really do feel like Sarah Simone, I keep saying, like, because I haven't really looked into it even since I read the books. I feel like she did some research, because the inclusion of even like the biblical verses and just what she was getting at and reiterating through our main characters was really indicative, as someone who has really thought about those contrasting ideas of physical and spiritual, and it just was icing on the cake. I really do think that it is a series worth reading and thinking beyond just the smutty part of it. I mean, that was good too, but beyond it, I think her commentary was chef's kiss. Okay, so the next one that I have on my list is Tumble. Tumble made me cry. Tumble is a phenomenal book. So our book focuses on Addie Ramirez, and Addie is living with her mom and her mother's partner. I can't even remember if they're married at that point or not. Anyway, that regardless of the point, it focuses on Addie Ramirez and her mother and her mother's partner, who wants to adopt. So they are married, yeah. Who wants to adopt Addie as his daughter, because he's about to have a baby with Addie's mother, and he really cares about Addie. He has played a role in Addie's life, but the thing about it is in order for them to go through with the adoption, they have to get permission from Addie's biological father. And so Addie is pretty much confused, like, okay, so you have to get permission from my biological father in order to be my legal guardian, to be my other father. So she's younger, she's 12 in this, and so she doesn't really necessarily understand, but she doesn't know anything about her dad. She doesn't have really any memories of her dad, and her mother doesn't really talk about her dad. And so Addie, as any child, is pretty much like, well, why won't you tell me about my dad? Like, what's so wrong? Like, what happened? And her mother's just kind of closed lips on it. So she ends up finding an old, I believe, like yearbook picture or something along those lines, and she figures out who her dad is. And the cover is really beautiful because it has to do with wrestling, because Addie loves wrestling, and come to find out her dad's side of the family comes from a long line of wrestlers. And so she's really interested in getting to know that side of the family and sharing that passion of wrestling and know this other side to her. Whew, this book was hard for me because I am a single parent who has another parent who is not involved, and Addie's mother knows, of course, what she's dealt with in dealing with Addie's father, and she's doing her gosh darn best to protect her daughter and to tell her, like, listen, you know, I don't want to stop you from seeing your father, but, you know, don't get your expectations up. And of course, Addie pushes back. She's like, you know, that was the relationship that you had with him. It's going to be different between me and him because I'm not you. And I think as a mother, I know that hurt Addie's mother, but it's just a moment where she kind of had to let her daughter just kind of figure things out for herself. And I know that was really, really tough for her. And so we get this glimpse into Addie's attempt to build this relationship with her dad, and it is so heartbreaking. There's one particular scene that I think just will stick with me, where they go to, I don't know if it was a festival or like a flea market or something they go to, I can't remember, and there is a guy there, a vendor, who writes poems, and with these poems he gathers information from whoever, you know, wants the poem from him. And so what he tried to do is like, tell me some beautiful things about, you know, your daughter. Tell me what you know about her, like her favorite food, her favorite color, and, you know, what does she want to be when she grows up. And so I can write this poem from a dad to a daughter. And in that moment, Addie realizes, like, she has this internal thought where she's like, this was a bad idea, because it clicks. Her dad knows nothing about her. Nothing about her. He was there the first year of her life, and then he just disappeared. And so he knows nothing about her. And as the man continues to ask questions, Addie's dad like gets upset, like, why are you asking me these questions? You should know the answer to these questions. I shouldn't have to do your job for you. And like he throws money at the man and just kind of walks away. And it's kind of like it clicked, like, this man knows nothing about me. And, you know, everything comes and ends up coming full circle. I think that this was just beautifully written. I love the incorporation of the history of wrestling and how it just applied to Addie's family and to her life. I thought that was really intriguing. I thought the storytelling was done exceptionally well. It was just so beautifully done. I loved every second of the storytelling, the relationships that existed between characters, how Addie was getting to know her dad's side of the family, and how everybody wanted to protect Addie, but at the same time they wanted to give her space to understand herself. And her mother is my hero, because I know that I may have to do the same thing one day. And you don't want to see your child get hurt, but you have to let your child go and find out for themselves sometimes. And the only thing that you could do is be there to pick them up and brush them off and put the Band-Aid on them when they inevitably do get disappointed. And it's just disappointing as a parent when there's another adult that could be in the picture that is not doing what they can to be there for their child. And I know her mother just struggled with that so greatly. And so as a parent to another parent, like, my God, I just felt for her so much. And I felt for Addie having to go through that, knowing that, you know, maybe it's something that my child would have to go through. But this was a phenomenal book. I loved every second of it. 5 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait to read more from this author. I know that her other book, First Rule of Punk, I believe is a Newbery Honor Award. And so definitely looking forward to reading that one as well. The next one that I have on this list is Refugee by Alan Gratz. This is one that I recently talked about also in my recent reads, number 11. So Alan Gratz is a well-known middle grade historical fiction writer, and this is one where he focuses on the 3 different perspectives of 3 kids that are all becoming refugees. One is from 1930s Nazi Germany, the other is 1994 trying to leave Cuba, and then 2015 we focus on a Syrian boy as his family tries to go to Turkey. And so each narrative basically just details their experience of leaving whatever issues, political, economic, and racial and ethnic issues that their countries are dealing with, and have for their own safety just having to leave and go somewhere else. What Alan Gratz does with this book, though, is that he is very, very detailed in all of the atrocities that these 3 kids face. There is no holding back. There is no shying away. There is violence on page. There's death on page. There is explicit details associated with death on page. So I would be mindful of that going into that, or if you're introducing this into a middle grade reader, I would say, like, age-wise, like a child that is middle grade age, I would be very mindful of that. But I won't say that it is necessary to shy away from it or that it was gratuitous. He did this in a very tasteful way to provide that open window for kids to understand what other kids around the world are going through or have gone through. And it is building that sense of empathy that while we may live in a certain lens of privilege, there are children who are seeing things that they should never have to see in their lifetime. Never in their lifetime. You have kids who are becoming adults before they should even have to become adults, because one of our characters, especially our main character that is from 1930s Nazi Germany, he definitely has a lot of growing up to do and having to become the man of his family when he is so significantly young. But because of the issues that his family was facing, his mother not being able to manage everything, his father being sent to a concentration camp and having PTSD from that and not being able to function because of that, it is extremely stressful. We have our young girl from Cuba who's having to make decisions about her family and dealing with the conflict between her father and her grandfather, and our young boy from Syria who literally just sees death left, right, and center. Everywhere he goes, somebody is dying in front of him. And so for me as an adult reader, I was like, wow, like, whew, like it's a lot. It is a lot, but I understand why Alan Gratz did it. There is a certain level of interconnectedness between the characters in these stories that I found to be just exceptionally done. I loved it. I thought it was just very fluid in the way that he connects the dots of all the stories at the end. In this story, I would say that it is vital to read the author's note because Alan Gratz details where he got his inspiration from with all of the characters, the real individuals that these fictional characters are based off of, and he details exactly what was happening in each country at the time, whether that was Nazi Germany and being Jewish, when there was a time in which Castro decided that he was going to let anybody that wanted to leave Cuba go, which I did not realize that he did that as a strategy to get rid of those who were opposing him. Like when people were rioting and people were pushing back against him, he would just let anybody go that wanted to go to ease that tension so he could go back to doing what he was doing before. And then of course with Syria, I mean, man, he based it off of one young boy. He saw a picture of him after I think he was found in some wreckage. Like after a strike had happened, there was a picture of a young boy who had been found in the wreckage. He was alive, but he had seen that picture and then he drew inspiration to create this character and this narrative. It was just well done. I can't wait to read more by Alan Gratz, and I definitely ended up giving that one 5 out of 5 stars, like without fail. That was like a 5-star read. And the last one that I have on my list is New Kid by Jerry Craft. What can I say about this? I can't believe it took me so long to read New Kid, y'all. Like, New Kid is amazing. Definitely a 5-star read. It focuses on a character by the name of Jordan. I wanted to make sure I got excited. I'm about to call him something else now. It focuses on a main character by the name of Jordan. Jordan ends up going to a new school. His parents put him in this new school because they think that it'll be better opportunities, which is how it always starts with us. Everybody want to put us in a better school so we have better opportunities. If schooling was just fixed, we wouldn't have these problems. If schooling was equitable, but it is not. So they put him in this new school because they think he'll have better opportunities, but Jordan is one of the few kids of color at his school. And so we follow him as he deals with microaggression after microaggression from students and from teachers alike. And so he ends up connecting with another character in this book, but they're very weary because they're like, we're the only 2 black boys in the school. Like, I don't just want to assume that because we're both black, we have to link up with each other, nothing like that. But they do serve as each other's support system. But it's just the amazing atrocities that these kids just have to go through, in the sense that you can't even go to school and feel comfortable without people making assumptions about you, without teachers saying like, oh, well, you know, you're very, very angry. You're an angry black boy. And I just felt super connected, even though this is not intended for me. A lot of the experiences that they went through in this book, I went through as a kid. And so it's good that we get to see Jordan kind of work through it and build new friendships. But I think one of the things that definitely stood out to me is that his mom and his dad were kind of like on opposing sides of this, which is a great thing to see, because I think you have varying perspectives whenever you think about this in terms of the black community, because we're not a monolith. And so his mom is like, listen, he's going to have to deal with this in the real world. He needs to get a taste of it now. It'll make him stronger. And his dad's like, I don't want my kid to have to go to school and deal with this crap. He should be able to go to school, be black, exist, and nothing go wrong. And so I think that it is very it's very difficult when thinking about how those two things work, because it is the real world. Like, you can't shelter your kids so much that they just don't know what's going to happen when they have to go out into the real world. But you also don't want your kids to have to face unnecessary trauma and have somebody constantly make them feel like they're uncomfortable in their own skin because they're Black and they have these preconceived notions. So I thought that that was just great. There is some interesting things that Jerry Craft did with like the introduction to all of the chapters. They were based on like movies, and of course on camera I can't find one, because why would I be able to find one on cue? But basically he like alters the names of chapters. Like this one is a Kwanzaa story, but you know the movie A Christmas Story, so he does that with all of the chapter headings, which I thought was really, really cool. Like this one too, Radman. But of course, you know that that's from the TV show Mad Men. So I thought that was just, it was, first of all, that was really cool. I like that he also dropped a couple of other like graphic novels in here, and not name dropping for the sake of name dropping like some people are currently doing. We're just going to name drop our best friends in our books. I mean, no shade, all tea though. He's dropping graphic novels like the Bone series by Jeff Smith, and of course, why can't I remember it? I don't know why it took me so long to kind of get that to click, but the Amulet series, duh. So he brings up the Amulet series. He also brings up the Bone series. And I love that because kids are often told that graphic novels are not real reading. And so for him to incorporate other graphic novel series that these kids could explore if they enjoy New Kid, it was just brilliant. And I appreciate it. As someone who's a big proponent for graphic novels, comics, and manga in the hands of kids, this was it. I cannot wait to get a copy of Class Act. I need to go ahead and buy my copy of Class Act. I cannot wait to buy a copy of Class Act. And then the third one in the series comes out April of next year, so be on the lookout for that. All right, y'all, so those are my best and worst books of September. If you have made it this far, let me know in the comments below what was your favorite book that you read in the month of September, and what was your least favorite book that you read in the month of September. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support the channel, follow me on social media. All the links will be down in the description box below, and I'll be back with another video soon. Ta-ta. I'm being so extra. I'm always so damn extra. Bye, y'all.